knows that you know that I know that you know that he knows that I know that this whole thing is a ridiculous shtick. And I did catch him, and I'm saving face, and he's not going to talk.
I
Shalom
love
Aleichem.
that success is not about compliance and it's not about control. That chinuch is, as Revolver writes, the chinuch is chinukas abayis. It's the beginning of something forever.
But you're so much more flexible to that struggling kid. You lose classroom control. You lose that a little bit of the authoritative pedestal that our teachers and a rebbein can sometimes be on. Welcome to the Learning Curve podcast, brought to you by Mishpacha magazine.
We're raising children in a changing and challenging world.
So let's tackle the important issues facing families today.
I'm Rabbi Garfield, Menal of Yeshiva Torah Emes in Houston, and I love talking about chinuch.
I'm Rabbi Ari Schonfeld, Menal of Yeshiva Katana Manhattan, Rosh Meister of Beis Sipra Manhattan, Director of Camp Aish. I also love talking chinuch, and of course, a little bit of fishing.
Join us as we answer your questions and discuss the topics that matter to parents the most. This episode is sponsored by Israel Bookshop Publications. Now that Purim is behind us, it's time to turn our attention to the next great night on the calendar, the Seder. If you're looking for an Haggadah that will truly transform your Pesach, start with Living the Haggadah of the Mashgiach, Rav Matisyahu Salomon Zecher Tzadik Livracha. This remarkable work was prepared by his close Talmud, Rabbi Yeshaya Perlau, at the Mashgiach's personal request. It captures not just explanations, but Masorah, how the Mashgiach conducted a Seder, what he emphasized, how he described the Makos with vivid clarity. It's authentic, foundational, transformative. And Israel Bookshop Publications is the official distributor of all the Mashgiach Svarim, including the beloved Matnas Chaim and Matnas Chelko series, as well as the original Hebrew Matnas Chaim Haggadah, upon which the Living Haggadah is based. Looking for more options? They've got you covered. The Questions Asked Haggadah, the Rav Daniel Alter Haggadah, Foundations of Faith from Rav Gershon Weissatzal, the Nesiva Shalom Slonim Haggadah, the Maharal Haggadah, the Haggadah for Teens, and the Torah's Chaim Haggadah from Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. And of course, don't prepare for Pesach without the classic Rabbi Blumenkrantz Pesach Digest, plus the Star K and Rav Gershon Bess Pesach Guide, all officially distributed by Israel Bookshop. Upgrade your Seder, deepen your preparation. Visit IsraelBookshopPublications.com and make this Pesach the most meaningful one yet.
We all know the feeling. Between grocery bills, tuition, and simchas, expenses add up fast. But if you're like many, you probably have a goldmine of credit card points just sitting there unused. The Paid Group makes it easy to turn those points into real cash. Don't let your points expire or settle for a random gift card. Go to thepaidgroup.com for a fast cash quote. It's a quick win for your family budget. That's the Paid Group, spelled ThePaydGroup.com. Bruchim Abayim, and welcome back to another episode of The Learning Curve. As onward we move, we get closer to Pesach. So spring is almost in the air. It's been in the air in Houston for the last 5,786 years. But at least here on the East Coast, we can at least dream of better days, of warmer days. So, Rabbi, good to have you back.
Right, great to be here. And yeah, it's a really enjoyable thing. And the Mitzvah Shem will continue growing and exploring more and more issues. You wonder, how could there be so many issues in chinuch? Somehow there are just always more.
Baruch Hashem. There's more. There's, as you said in a previous podcast, a couple of podcasts ago, and I've said this also, we maybe have to be more careful because people that interview in our schools now, they don't have to ask us what our hashkafas are. They could just put on the learning curve.
I love it.
I have a Talmud who's thinking of moving to Houston.
Ooh.
I'm not going to say anything more than that because I don't want to give anything away. And he said to me, and I love the chinuch. I said, what do you know about chinuch in Houston? He's like, Rabbi Garfield. How do you like that?
That's great.
So I'm like, Baruch Hashem. All right, we have an exciting episode today, and I think they're always important. Some maybe not nuanced, I would say, but more boutique questions that certain families struggle with, the certain kids, and then a very
large, almost like macro
Right.
question in chinuch. We have a very exciting guest to talk about
Right.
it. I think I got the first question to be asked to
Yes.
me.
Okay.
So, Rabbi, take it
Here we
away.
go. Dear TLC, my fourth grader always seems to have things that we haven't gotten for him. He tells me that he trades for things or that he wins things off of other kids. It doesn't feel right. Sometimes he has unexplained cash. Not a lot, but he wouldn't give me a straight answer about anything that he gets. And he gets defensive when I ask. I'm afraid he's stealing from other kids. How do I deal with this?
So, kids that steal, right? I guess would be the topic. Kids that steal. I think the age is such a defining factor in how you deal with
Right.
this.
As
This is a fourth
right?
grader.
So what is that, 8? 8 or
So,
9?
yeah, 9 years old,
Mhm.
8, 9 years
Yeah.
old. So, I had an episode in camp, one of my early years in camp, in which a child was stealing. And it was pretty apparent. Man, you're in a bunk. So
Right.
it's just everything's there,
Right.
right? Snacks are there. And no one allows chas v'shalom many tradition soups, but in the event that kids are hiding
Oh, is that
tradition
a
soups, they're
thing?
there.
Is that a
Hot water, because it means using hot water. So we try
I don't
to
want to
move
take
away
away
from it.
from what you're answering, so don't forget a segment. I was watching another wonderful podcast that was interviewing someone who went to jail from Guy, and he said that the currency in jail were tuna packets. I don't know if you heard that. It's like funny, like in jail, like the most valuable thing you could have is one of those sealed tuna packets. Okay, go ahead.
So in camp,
Right.
tradition soup, if you can get away with, if you get your counselor to fill it up with hot water, so therefore it's not dangerous, is very valuable. Anyways, so this boy was a fifth grader and he was stealing. He was stealing money. He was stealing. And I called the therapist and I said, what is this? Like, what am I? Is this a mental health challenge, right? Is this pathological? He's a fifth grader stealing. And the therapist said to me that fifth grade is the year of turnover. In other words, until fifth grade, it can be viewed as age appropriate. And maybe we'll unpack this a little. But once you hit fifth grade and sixth grade, and I think the idea is that when you reach adolescence, part of adolescence is the ability to empathize truly with others and to see someone else's perspective. And healthy kids become more emotionally sensitive and being noise ba'ol and being mevater. Those midas really, besides the habits that we try to create younger years, that happens in middle school. And stealing is such an ignoring of the other person that if you're doing it in middle school, it's incredibly
Wow.
concerning.
Wow.
If you're doing it in younger grades, it's less concerning. Now, I called the parent, and it's not a fun conversation to hear
right.
from a head
Right.
counselor. Your son is stealing
Right.
in camp.
Mildly,
Whoa, right? So but the way in which I got the parents on my side, and I think this is in general a good mahalach for administrators, for rebbeim. And I said to the mother, I said, by the way, I just have to say, in one of the previous episodes, I think in episode 8 or I know maybe episode 6, I used the last name Silverman. My fake names are Silverman and Goldstein. I want to be clear. My fake names are Silverman and Goldstein. And I have a friend whose name is Rabbi Schneur Silverman.
Yes.
He's
From
you might know
Atlanta,
him,
sure,
originally
I
from
know him
Atlanta,
well.
Bnei Yisrael, a superstar Rebbe in Darche and in
Yeah.
Camp Monk. He's from the back, except the teams he roots for aren't so good, but we'll leave that for a different time. But anyways, so I mentioned in a conversation we were having about wearing helmets and getting involved in other people's kids who are making mistakes and dangerous, right? Getting involved. And I mentioned, so if you say, Silverman, put on a helmet. So he listened to the episode, and the next day he texts me, by the way, I'll wear a helmet from now on. So I want to be clear. When I say Silverman and Goldstein and Yankee, these are all fictitious names. Fine. Anyways, so I call up the father and I say, Mr. Silverman, I want to let you know your son Yankee is stealing. And there's not a suffix, there's not a doubt. We have the money, we have it's the tefillin, whatever the money was during tefillin. Right? And I said to him the following. I said, I'm not worried about chafatzim, about the objects. Oh, he sold $20 from the other kid. I'll give the $20. The tradition soup, I'll give the kid from the canteen. I'm not worried about me being able to handle the fallout of kids missing things. We'll replace them. I am very concerned that your son is not going to have friends. Because already the kids in this bunk don't want to sleep, don't want to have their bed next to him. They don't want their clothing next to him, right? They don't want to sit next to him in the dining room because he's taking their food. So I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for you and your son, that if we don't get him help, he's going to suffer. So when you say that to a parent, you just totally disarm, because I'm not attacking you. Your son's not in I mean, I can get him in trouble in camp. Yeah, he stole. What are we going to do about the fact that your son is stealing, right? That's just, to me, an approach in general. When you deal with younger kids that are stealing, it's age appropriate. Like if this child was 3 or 4 years old, you wouldn't even write you wouldn't write a letter to the learning curve. You wouldn't even have a
Fourth grade
conversation,
is
right?
on the cusp.
They
Right.
fourth grade is on the right. So because a 3 and 4-year-old don't understand the concept of what is someone else's. I heard an amazing insight one from a child psychologist. The concept of sharing is a layered, mature idea, which is why a 5-year-old will never share. Because in their mind, if I'm holding it, it's mine. If you're holding it, it's yours. And I did this at home. Can I know how my kids are older now? When my kids were little, and Chani wanted to borrow Ruthie. Yeshivish a podcast now, so I can't say what we call her. I call her Ruthie. Everyone else calls her Racheli. And she would say, Racheli, can I borrow your pen? And she would say no. I'm like, why not? No, it's mine. And I would literally sit her down and I would say, Ruthie, listen to me. This is your pen. Even when Chani is holding it and playing with it, it's still your pen because it's yours. Literally say it 3 or 4 times. When she's coloring it, it's your pen. She's going to take it for a few minutes and give it back to you.
I know, we're going to have on a very chashuv mechanech soon. And I know he's thinking about Piaget and product permanence, object permanence, because his father is a big psychologist. But this is studied about children don't understand peekaboo and all this stuff. It is a developmental thing.
Correct. Right. But the question, as you said, then you get older, 1st grade, 2nd grade. Sometimes they take things because they just want and they're impulsive control. 4th grade is a tricky year. 4th grade is already at the point where if they are stealing, it usually isn't just for the candy. It usually isn't just for the money. It's usually, hopefully it's not a mental, if it continues till 7th grade, then there's something terribly concerning. It's usually a kid that feels that he just needs things, that there's a hole, there's a lack of understanding, or really there's a need that he has that he isn't being filled. And it's obviously an impulse control challenge. But I do think that in 4th grade still, as a parent, I would treat it as regular chinuch. I would talk to him about it. I wouldn't obviously figure out whether it's true or not true, and assuming that, of course, it's true, then make sure to give it back and explain it to him and talk him through about what belongs to other people. Role play which is incredibly valuable to a 4th grader. And I think he can still be a healthy, balanced 4th grader and be stealing. Is that a chiddush to you?
Honestly, I'm feeling mechusser because I don't really know enough about stealing, to be honest. I don't have a whole lot of experience with it, but I'm wondering, are you saying that it's not a reason to call the therapist? Meaning this alone would not be a reason if a kid is stealing? The mother doesn't even know, in this
Correct.
case, the parent, I should say, doesn't even know if the child's stealing. They are just accusing them of it, so to speak, right? I think there's a bit of a
If it
jump
was
there.
just the kid who's stealing in school, right? I would call the Rebbe.
But that's not
Maybe
even
call him an
clear
owl.
here, but let's say it was clear.
Let's assume it's
Yeah.
stealing. No, the kid's stealing, right? And the kid's stealing from the mother, right? If the kid's stealing, by the way, he's stealing from
So
everybody.
is that a reason to
kids,
call a therapist on its own, would you say?
I wouldn't. No.
Okay.
No. And again, that's why it's so unique. Like 4th grade is like, it's getting to the edge. It's getting to the edge. And it depends how mature the kid is. But it's just a kid who's stealing. It might be that this kid is super hungry or jealous. He doesn't have money at home
Right.
and he's jealous of other kids.
Right.
I think it can be within the framework of normal chinuch, but you have to really watch it because you're going to role play with your 4th grader. You're going to talk about you're going to incentivize your 4th grader. And if that behavior sticks and you're in 5th grade, first of all, you're going to tell him you can't go to camp, right? And you can't have sleepovers if you're going to do this. And you're at the edge of the point where you get very concerned and like, well, what is the whole? You have to keep at it and watch it to find
Right.
out
What's the underlying
whether this
cause?
is something, the underlying cause is it more deeply concerning than what you're seeing?
Okay, yeah. Like I said, I don't have a lot to say about it because I just simply don't know enough about stealing. I haven't had that many cases, I guess. It's not something I've looked into to comment on it more, but lucky we have 2 of us, so one could say things and the other one could say he doesn't know. Baruch Hashem. Our lucky listeners, look at that. Okay, let's move on to the next question.
Okay. Hopefully you'll have something to say
I
on
hope
this one.
so. I
Wow.
don't know.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, you figured the guy's getting paid the big
Yeah,
bucks.
it's
He's
true.
got 9 podcasts. He's writing every article there is known to man, and you would think he would
You'd
have. Okay,
think,
fine.
think.
Oh, it's okay. Okay. So I'll ask you this question. I'll leave for 20 minutes and come back. Dear TLC, I have a question for the learning curve. I really enjoy listening to each episode. Thank you for putting them out. Is there a strategy to handle a child who refuses to accept that they can do anything wrong? My daughter gets into fights in school, but it's always the other kid's fault. Same thing at home. If we give a consequence for something that we witnessed, her reaction is to cry that we're so mean to her and we hate her. We try to talk to her about this during calm moments, but nothing seems to help. Now, do we know the age of this daughter? No. So I hope she's not 18, but
Let's assume a seventh
could
grader. I was
decide the
thinking
age.
seventh or eighth grader
Yeah.
is like,
you could decide the age
yeah,
and then take.
I would say seventh grader. Okay, so this is a great example where the issue has nothing to do with the issue. Meaning, it doesn't matter if you get her to say the words, I am guilty. That is not where you should focus on. This is not like she doesn't need to do vidui in order for her world to fall back into place. So stop focusing on, and I know this, I'm not saying that the parent who wrote this is doing that, but I'm saying I don't care if she admits it or not. So let's just leave that aside for a second. Okay. So leaving that aside, what's going on? Okay. So let's see what we do know. One is she has tremendously low self-esteem because she has a hard time admitting she did anything wrong. So what are we doing? Let's focus on her self-esteem. Okay. And I would say,
Could you just, I want you just for the sake of the audience, just to explain that what it would mean to us, Baruch Hashem, we're in this
okay,
field. So that's,
well, she has low
it was pasha to
self-esteem
me.
because she can't admit that she does anything wrong. When people can't admit they did anything wrong, that means that doing something wrong would undermine who they are, their value as a person. And the only people whose value gets undermined by making something wrong are people who have a very low self-concept, where they think that they're only valuable because they achieve, because they don't make mistakes, or they're so scared of the consequences. Again, assuming everything else is healthy, you never know if the parents are crazy or overreact to everything. Maybe they would lie to just protect themselves. But assuming that's not the case. So I think the real energy here is about what are we doing? Forgetting the situation, forgetting the fighting, forgetting whatever else the dysfunction is. Just broadly.
The story almost doesn't
Yeah.
matter. The facts almost
Yeah,
don't
when
even
I
matter.
read this, I don't care if one of the things she gets in fights, okay, we'll deal with that. I mean, we have to deal with that. But the first step is, why does this child have such a, and it doesn't have to be a why, because some children just have low self-esteem, but to whatever extent we could build her self-esteem, giving her praise, finding her ways to shine, making sure that if she has any handicaps that are getting in the way of her ability to function, learning issues, social issues, whatever we're doing to fortify her self-identity, I would start with that.
So what happens? So you have this 7th grade girl who now struggles with self-esteem, but therefore cannot accept
Put
consequence.
2 months
So you
into
saying,
self-esteem, and then I'll talk to you about that. Call me back. That's what I would say. Put 2 solid months into self-esteem building. I want you putting money into it. I want you focusing on it. I want you doing everything you can about that, and then call me back. Because I have a feeling that it will resolve a lot of it, and then we could deal with the other stuff. That's just my obviously, these questions, we don't know the story, so
of course,
but that's my gut. When I see this, such a defensiveness and an inability, that screaming low self-esteem and with such a loud voice.
is there room for another piece here? And that is the authority figure. In other words, now maybe that's self-esteem, but I think it's different. In other words, maybe the child just really struggles with accepting authority. And there is a certain, for whatever reason, I make my own rules and I decide what is right and what is wrong. And I decide what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. And therefore, when there's an adult in my life who's trying to legislate and punish and decide you are not in charge. You have, there are kids, we all have kids in our school, right? That are just,
We call that oppositional
they're
and defiance.
right. Right, yeah, or ODD,
Right.
right? What we used to call none of us, chas v'shalom. What do we call mechutzafim? But there's a certain, like when the Rebbe, says, I don't know,
I didn't get this from
turns on
that
the light.
email. It could be that is the case. That's not how I reacted to it. But there are kids who struggle with something called oppositional defiance, which, by the way, me and Dr. Mandelman, Shmuel Mandelman, have a great routine about where
Let me hear.
I could argue with him for hours on it.
Who's Abbott and who's Costello?
Yeah,
Is there like a routine
he's
like
very
that?
against, he's oppositionally against oppositional defiant disorder. So I want to stipulate that. And I'm pro, or I think it's a disorder that's worthy of a name and acknowledgement. But regardless,
You do? So you think, what's it? You do? You think that oppositional defiance disorder, which I imagine half of our audience is is right now either can't believe that word is what do you mean? The kid's mechutzef. He doesn't have their cheretz. And you tell me there's a disorder called ODD. I know this wasn't the parent, but we're allowed to
Yes, I believe it's a disorder.
pivot a little.
As identified in the DSM since I think the DSM 3, 4, 4TR, 5, 5TR, and it will be in the DSM 6. So yes, I believe it's a disorder because I believe in the field of psychology and I believe in the Chachmas Agayim to look at thousands and thousands of children and look for patterns. And that, my friend, is what a disorder is. But let's not go there because it's not fair to Dr. Mandelman, since he's not here to try to intimidate me with his defense. We will leave that. But my point is to say I was not approaching this as a child whose options are defiant. I was approaching it more with a child who can't own her mistakes. I do have one other knach that I would like to say, and then we certainly want to go and bring in our special guest. My other knach is a technique I developed. I taught ninth grade for a long time, and ninth graders, teenagers are not apt at like owning their mistakes. And not that anyone is, but certainly not 14-year-olds. So a classic example of a technique I developed, which I use all the time, is let's say a child's talking and I say, stop talking. And, you're teaching and the kid keeps talking. You say, Baruch, I said, stop talking. And Baruch says to me, I wasn't talking. What? Wait, me? So I say, oh, so Baruch, what you're saying is, you know how wrong it is to talk, right? Of course. And you would never talk. Of course not. So perfect. Let's move on. Like, I don't need to argue whether he was talking or not. He's basically admitting to me that he knows it's wrong and he won't do it anymore. So, Shalom Al Yisrael. So, like, she comes home from school and she says, I didn't fight. She said, great. So it's wrong to fight. Yeah. So what would you do if you got, so you could talk about it without forcing the issue. You don't have to
Except
force
that,
it. It doesn't
except that
matter.
there's no consequence. But there's no consequence, and there's no perhaps right.
Life isn't, you
I
don't
know
need to give consequences.
If you have a rule
Ari.
in your class, that a kid who's talking, I don't know, gets a demerit and loses
That's
2
a
minutes of
stupid
recess.
rule, so
right?
I don't know. I don't believe in consequences. I believe in chinuch.
You don't believe in
I believe in
consequences.
chinuch. Yeah,
Wow.
it's a different thing.
So wow.
Sometimes
Believes in ODD, doesn't believe in consequences. Oh
yeah,
wow.
I'm not married to consequences.
I'm-
There are times when you have to. There are times when there are things that happen that are chinuch actions that might appear to an untrained eye as punishment or consequences. But my main issue is to help this kid not talk anymore in shir. That's my main interest, right? So if Baruch says to me, "Ich versteh's," I understand you're not allowed to talk. And of course, I would never have. First of all, he knows that you know that I know that you know that he knows that I know that this whole thing is a ridiculous shtick. And I did catch him, and I'm saving face, and he's not going to talk. Shalom Al
I love
Yisrael.
it. I love when
Move on.
I love when you're like, I touched the right button on like your lapel, and
Now I'm
bam.
awake.
Good. I got what I wanted. We can move on. You made up for your lack of energy in the first question.
Oh, I have nothing to say about it, but yeah, I love this trick, and I have a whole bunch of them. And the beauty of it is that the kids know that you're calling them on it respectfully, and it's like a fun. Okay, anyway, that's what I have to
Valid.
say.
So, moving on to our spotlight question of the week, we've been trying to bring on Rabbi Dovid Goldman for a while. At least I have had this idea. I waited for the right question to come in. I want to explain. I'm going to give a shtickle Torah now to explain.
Please do.
As we welcome into the learning curve Rabbi Dovid Goldman. I'm going to explain who Rabbi Goldman is, and then I'm going to read the question.
How do you know
and
it?
It's going to be a whole.
Your old friends?
I don't know.
I'm kidding.
Good morning. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Dovid Goldman, who's currently the Manahal and Heichal Torah in Teaneck. Rabbi Goldman, I'm going to explain why before I explain how I know it. But okay.
Do your thing.
Yeah. Rabbi Goldman is a Musmach of Yeshivas Chavetz Chaim. He grew up in the Chavetz Chaim system. His father-in-law is a longtime Chavetz Chaim Rebbe in Witz, Wisconsin. He is one of the pe'ers, one of the crown jewels of the Chavetz Chaim world. He was a Manal in St. Louis for 7 years in the Chavetz Chaim, Manal in First Soul in Brooklyn for 7 years before moving on to Heichal
He's
in
not in
Teaneck.
Heichal for 7
as
years
Manal.
because then we know what's coming, baby.
But here's the before as he's on, so Rabbi Goldman is
Okay,
listed a little
yes.
awkward, which I don't mind. Chavetz Chaim is like, if you want to know what they're known for, it's Messiah. It's old school, right? It's Messiah from Rav Henech to Rav David Leibowitz to the Alta from Slobodka. It's like, and everything is Messiah. I imagine the chicken on Tuesday is the same as it was 60 years ago. Maybe it's even the same chicken. But that's Chavetz Chaim. And yet Rabbi Goldman is the most forward-thinking, progressive, in creative mechanech there is. So therefore he is this like almost stira paradox or beautiful combination of both worlds, which is why as Rabbi Goldman listens awkwardly, I'm going to read the question, and then I'm going to let Rabbi Goldman can't speak yet. No. So Rabbi David. Rabbi Goldman is how are you?
I don't even want to interrupt. I'm enjoying listening to you guys so much. I wish we could keep going.
I bet you would
By the way-
say, one second, I know Chavetz Chaim guys really well. I bet you're going to say, no, that
Good.
is the Chavetz Chaim. The innovation is part of the derech, Rabbi.
Of course, if Hanef says b'shas kaneis pazer, to go to the places that no one else would go.
Exactly.
So what other Chavetz Chaim guys are going to come to Heichal? So
Exactly. Das
Yes.
is a
Gewaldig.
chalik from the Messiah. Okay.
So Rabbi Goldman and I actually we went to two different camps together. We went to Dora Golding back in 1990 for one summer,
Wow.
and we went to Camp Heller together. I will not mention the fact that I think I mentioned the reason Rabbi Goldman, he just recently moved to Passaic. And I said to him, do you remember that in Color War in 1990, and you hit me basically over the head with a hockey stick? And he's like, that was you?
That's great. Wow.
So, machalach. Yeah, you were a very
Thank
good
you,
athlete.
thank
Rabbi
you.
Goldman was.
Okay, good.
So here's the question. With all of that introduction, right? This is a question, and that I think is a fundamental question in chinuch. So here we go. Rabbi, you want to read it? You want me to read it? How
I
would you
don't
do
know.
this?
You're on fire. I think you should read it.
I'm on fire.
Yeah,
I'm
I think you
done.
should.
I wasn't really offering to. I'm reading it. So here we go. Dear TLC, and usually we get emails from parents. This is from a Mora, which is
I didn't see this
something
one
that
yet,
we
so I don't know
know
what's
is different.
coming. Let's see.
Okay, dear TLC. Hi, thank you for your entertaining and enlightening podcast. I am a
Nice.
passionate,
Sorry.
yes, I am a passionate fifth grade Mora, and I am deeply invested in chinuch. I would definitely classify my philosophy as new age chinuch with all that entails. Okay. But after listening to your last podcast, I have a question. Now, I don't know which podcast. It could be probably any of our podcasts. I don't know which
Let's
she doesn't
see,
say
let's
which is
see.
referring
Yeah.
to. Okay, let's see. I just returned from the Shiva of a renowned mechanechas in our community. She was a powerhouse, inspirational, witty, strong, and influential. But as I left the Shiva house, I heard a student of hers say, yeah, but come on, school is terrifying. To which her friend responded, oh yeah, I was petrified of her. We all know that it's pretty much impossible to be terrifying if we engage in all the practices that New Age chinuch entails, fist bumps included. Oh, she really listens. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that
'cause
was
I'm
the
a fist
Manal
bumper.
one, right? The Manal spot.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yes. But I don't think this woman could have made the roishim she did if not for her intimidating nature and the way she was mechanech. Try leading 300 students in tefillah single-handedly while maintaining absolute respect or creating an inspiring atmosphere with no fear factor. How do we reconcile this for ourselves? Are we losing out on a large part of chinuch? Or is what we are doing today worth the cost? Now, she signs her name. I'm obviously not going to read her name because I don't want to give away who this mechanechas was. But this is a Mora that was not embarrassed to say who she is. An amazing question, something that we discuss all the time. And that is old chinuch versus new
Right.
chinuch. Does that explain, Rabbi Goldman, did my introduction now make more sense to the
love it.
question?
I love it.
Valid. All right. So, Rabbi David, Rabbi Goldman again, he was the Manal and Heichal. You work in Mesiftas. Have you ever worked in elementary school?
No.
No.
And I'm enjoying listening to you about elementary school. I'm learning from you.
Beautiful. So, but I imagine this, of course, this is really a macro shaila and chinuch, so take it away.
Okay, first of all, I love the question. And I think the first step is most important is when we focus and think about specific people, it clouds our whole judgment, and we can't. I would apply this statement that small people talk about people and big people talk about ideas. So let's move off any particular person that we're thinking of, whether it's the person in the question or that manal that we had in elementary school that we have lots of feelings about. Let's move it into the abstract of ideas, and then later we could apply it back to people in a safer fashion. Secondly, I think it's really important to understand that to look be machshiv the doros before us, and to not passel the greatest generations, the generations since the Holocaust, that we're like an anas al gabi anak. There were certainly small little midgets on their backs, and what they carried and how they built Torah from nothing into what it is today is amazing and incredible. So chas v'shalom, nothing ever that we're going to say is going to take away from that genius and that greatness.
That said,
And certainly the challenges and what they were carrying was unbelievable. So the fact that they were able to be mechanchim at such a time, it's so easy now to come on tap and to look at the beautiful building and to say, yeah, we could do this better and fix this better. But that doesn't mean that we're better than them and anything like that. That being said, yes, I actually would throw out a challenge. I would challenge almost any mechanich from the past to ever show a video of their classroom. And I would think that when people talk, we totally believe in Yeridus Adoros and the generations before are much greater. At the same time, no doubt we believe in Yeridus Adoros, and we believe that the generations before were incredible and amazing. Yet we've learned so much in the world of chinuch, and the pool that we're picking from in terms of chinuch is a much wider pool than we came in post-Holocaust. The generational trauma that we have from the Holocaust is unbelievable, and what they were carrying was unbelievable. And I would challenge anybody to show, with that being said, to show their classroom and to say that the chinuch back then they're proud of from 20, 30, 40 years ago, to show it now. And so I think it's a non-starter to think that that there's not a lot of things and most things that aren't better now.
That's a big statement.
You disagree, Rabbi?
I'm not saying I disagree, but to
Would you-
say
How about the challenge?
so what I don't understand. So Rabbi Goldman didn't you just contradict yourself? And you said that
We've learned.
how great the previous generation was, and then you said, but let's face it, no one wants to watch
They're
the chinuch
greatest
from 30
people,
years ago.
tremendously greatest people, and tremendously what they were bringing to a world that didn't know Torah the way that we know it. The fights that they were fighting. Think of the European Gedolim, the most nefesh to come and to teach Torah in a world that didn't understand it. But it doesn't mean at the same time with that whole package that they understood the chacham of chinuch that we have now. We've been studying now as a community for so long, and even to understand, to apply the chacham of the Torah into just to appreciate the whole system of yeshivas. Like we think of the system of yeshivas being started in Luzhin. It wasn't yeshiva katanas, it wasn't high schools, it wasn't dealing with it. We're talking about for base medrashes. And in Chavetz Chaim, as an example, like we have everything that we did. We learned so much from Rav Henoch, we learned so much from the Masorah. Rav Henoch didn't teach high school. So we don't have, like, it wasn't to apply, how to apply that to how to apply Rav Henoch to high school. We don't have an exact malach on that. We have lots of people who ask shaylas, etc. And I think that to understand, yes, in Chavetz Chaim, we're super committed to the Masorah. At the same time, Rav Henoch, when he asked what's the biggest yisod of Slobodka, he said more important than Gadas Adam is individuality, appreciating the individual, and look at Slobodka and the array of Slobodka. So coming now, bring it down to the question a little more focused. I think that the first way to look at the question, I think, is we have to define success in chinuch. Normally, when we think of success, when the typical person, you look at a mechanech, and it sounds like in the question even, success in the question was, look, this mechanech was able to quiet and get compliance and control of a classroom. So I think that we have to define the difference between that success is not about compliance and it's not about control. That chinuch is, as Revolver writes, the chinuch is chinukas abayis. It's the beginning of something forever. The one pasuk in the Torah that describes chinuch is chanuch l'nar pidarko. Why? Not because that's what works. Chanuch l'nar pidarko, the reason that the pasuk Shalom says to do that is not because it's the best thing and it's going to work. In fact, it's short term, there could be a lot of things that could work much better. But the only reason that you do chanuch l'nar pidarko is because then gam ki yazkin, you won't go away from it. So the barometer of chinuch, which Shlomo Melech is telling us, is not that this is the best way to get compliance nor control. In fact, sometimes it could be the opposite. I remember as a kid, they used to have these commercials on the radio about you want your kid is defiant, or maybe ODD, your kid is defiant, we'll fix your kid in 3 weeks. Send us your kid in 3 weeks to fix it. And it struck me, it must be that it works. Because if it didn't work, they'd go out of business. Like they'd be off the air in a short time. Obviously, it worked to some degree. So then why don't we all do that? Why? The answer is to get compliance and to have short-term success. Yeah, you can do that. You can take a round peg and get it into the square hole. It's absolutely, you can get it in there. You take a mallet and you smash it. You might lose like side pieces like arms, legs, or I would say maybe neshamas and feelings. So compliance is not a stira. The fact compliance, if compliance is the barometer, so then enochanami, then I think that this question would be 100% right, and definitely certain forms of what we should go with. I think to take it to the next step is what some of the things, if you really think about what is compliance and control, what underneath, what gets that compliance and control. And I remember as a kid thinking about some of the things we used to think our Rebbeim went to like Rebbe school, and like a lot of the tricks, Garfield's giving us these wonderful happy tricks. A lot of the old tricks, if you think about them at the root of them, just think if sitting in shir, I remember sitting in shir, it would just the things that we would openly say in chinuch is that you better have your finger on the place, you better know the next word, otherwise I'm going to call on you. And what's going to happen? Either I'll throw you out, or even worse, embarrass. Or you better not be talking, because if you're talking in the back of that room of 300 kids, I'm going to call you out. And therefore what? Embarrass. So in other words, the way that we're creating control is with fear. And in fact, if you listen to the question, I'm pretty sure if you have the lashon in front of you, I think at the end of the question there, it said,
try leading 300 students in tefillah single-handedly while maintaining absolute respect or creating an inspiring atmosphere with no fear factor. So now 1 second. So Rabbi Goldman, is it possible to lead 300 kids in a room with while maintaining absolute respect with no fear factor?
I love the question. Just one more thing, just to appreciate it for a second, is when we're talking about fear factor and embarrassment, I want to study those for a second. We all know about busha, and that we all know that when someone embarrasses somebody, it's to a certain degree as if you killed them. And with that in mind, I remember leading a Rebbe meeting, and I was challenging the Rebbe, can we create classroom control without busha? And I was explaining, so we know that it's killing, so someone wouldn't do that. So I remember Rebbe was challenging me. So what do you mean? We're not killing them. We're not embarrassing them. If they don't have the finger on their place or they talk out, it's them doing it to themselves. As alumnus. So I said, that's fine, as long as we're comfortable with the fact that, let's say I say like this: everyone put their heads in their Gemara, and I'm just going to shoot bullets right above your head. And you're not going to, if you pick up your head, then you killed yourself. No one in the right mind would ever do such a thing. So if we understand Chazal and we really believe them.
Just to add a practice that I learned from the very Chashav Mechan Aaron Flash, who's the Manal in Yeshivish Spring Valley, a counselor in Camp Achim. When I was in Spring Valley as a Rebbe, I would watch him man the dining room on a microphone with 300 kids, and he would never say the last name of a kid on the microphone. If he wanted Yankee Goldstein's attention because he was out of place, he would say Yankee, and so then 8 Yankees would turn around, right? And then Goldstein. And he told me he does this because now a microphone, berabim. So I try as hard as I can. When I have a microphone and I'm in camp or in yeshiva in a large setting, I won't say a last name to reprimand on a microphone based on this conversation. Continue.
Love that. Love
Love
that.
it.
In fact, the Gemara, which talks about busha and talks about that it's better to jump into kibbutz and rather than embarrassing someone in public, is talking when the person did it to themselves. We're talking about that the poor person was in the house and she came outside wanting to see who's giving her tzedakah, the Gemara Ksubis, and she's bringing it to herself, yet still there, Mar Ukva jumped into the kibbutz. So the bottom line, busha, if we believe Chazal, busha is very serious. And fear, if you think about fear for a second, I think a modern day word that we use for fear is anxiety or being anxious. And we know, again, Chazal teaches that Eina Baishin Lomed, Eina Captain Malamed. Now, if you think about those words, we understand Eina Baishin Lomed, because if I'm embarrassed to ask, I'm not going to ask the question, I'm not going to get my answer. But it sounds like much more. It's not Eina Baishin Lomed, that question. Someone who's a Baishin can't learn. It's a difficult. Someone who's a captain can't be a Rebbe. He can't be a Malamed. It means even without that specific question, he's in a state of anxiety. And when someone's anxious, their brains don't work. The anxious kid looks like that kid who can't concentrate, looks like the kid with ADD can't concentrate. He's sitting in a war zone. Nothing's going in his head. So that as we understand this, you can get compliance with anxiousness. You get compliance with fear. But can you get chinuch with fear?
Well, so
Can you
hold
get
on.
how many things I challenge?
Rabbi Goldman, let's go
Yes.
back to that classroom in 1967 where they're all lined up in those wooden chairs with the top and the bottom, and they have their number 2 pencil, and the teacher, they're all dressed like nice with their hair right. The teacher standing in front of it with that long stick thing where they could point, and they're saying, now, boys or girls, take out your paper. That environment, you don't think that was a better education environment? Like, sure, there is some, I don't know if the word is anxiety or fear, but there's some structure that's intense. That's an intense structure. And you think that's a stira to memorizing vocabulary facts?
No, it's not a steer to memorize vocabulary. It's not a steer to black and white thinking. But I do think that to the degree that we feel anxiety, it doesn't sit with us. It doesn't go into doesn't settle with us in our emotional well-being. As an example, you think of a Maslow period of like someone who's holding by fear. He's at a base level of thinking. He's at a base. He needs his base needs taken care of. He's not ready for transcendence. He's not ready for like to touch that spirituality. We understand the difference that someone can memorize facts. But for it to go in, even in lumdis, even in learning to become a lamdin, you need to we always talk about you have to feel the svara. You have to you have to really get it. That involves a whole neshama. That involves really being emotionally present
That
and to be in it.
classroom that I just described, it might get you to memorize black and white facts, but it wasn't a good incubator for the deeper svaras. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. And to take it a step further, really honestly, I think the next step is much more. I think the main thing for us as a Rebbe is beyond the facts that we're going to study, the words we're going to study, or the black and white thinking, or even the svaras if we get them. The main thing of being a Rebbe, as an example, like the Rambam says that in Shemona Prakim, that what was Moshe Rabbeinu was Aveira by hitting the rock. He says Moshe Rabbeinu, it was because he had kas. So how does that fit in? Yano Mantem Bilahakti Sheni. So he says that what happened was Klal Yisrael saw Moshe angry. When they saw Moshe angry, they said, if Moshe is angry with us, it must be that Hashem is angry with us. And that was Achil Hashem, because that was a misrepresentation of Hashem, because Hashem Taka wasn't angry, the Rambam says. So what I appreciated from there is that what that means is that the way a kid thinks of, what does Hashem think of me? as a human, as a person, was Hashem think of me? Our kids come into the world, and their window to their window to the world is, if a Rebbe is domin to a Malach is a shliach of Hashem. Somebody look at the Rebbe as a personification of Hashem himself, and what they think a Rebbe thinks of them, that's what they think Hashem thinks of them. And there's no greater chil Hashem than misrepresenting Hashem to a kid. So when a kid's in that room, number one, I don't think that they learn properly. I think they feel stress. Number two, what the kids that sear in their mind, that anxiety, that anxiousness, that feeling to the Rebbe, they feel that is who Hashem is, number one, and that's what Hashem thinks of me. And that lesson they'll remember. I'm not sure how much we remember from that 300 kid assembly and how many things we could quote, but that for sure remember.
But here's the challenge, and it's something that I struggle with. I'm the manal, right? I'm the guy that's supposed to give the fear to the kids, right? And but here's something that I struggle with, and I struggle with my rebbeim and my teachers, my English teachers, maybe even more because they need a little bit. It's harder to get compliance from kids in the afternoon. Is we become so good at, generally speaking, as this Mora is writing, we become so much better at meeting the kids where they are, at being emotionally supportive, and not instilling fear, and not screaming, right? Screaming is treif almost, and not losing our cool, and just being. But there is a consequence, and the consequence is, and the fallout is that it's harder to control the classroom when you're so much more, not, I don't know, receptive, but you're so much more flexible to that struggling kid. You lose classroom control. You lose that a little bit of the authoritative pedestal that our teachers and a rabbein can sometimes be on. And my challenges are, is there a pendulum swing? Is there a balance that, yes, fear for the sake of fear is one thing, but avada, we all have yiras haraimus, and there should be, but no, what I mean is halavai, right? But there's supposed to be, and when a kid's sitting in a Rebbe's chair, that's something that is not tolerated. And when a kid is a mechutzef in class, it's not tolerated. We don't just say, well, we don't want to be like the Rebbe from 40 years ago, and we want to understand, and of course we do want to understand. But my challenge is, I don't know if Rabbi Garfield has this challenge, I don't know if Rabbi Goldman, you've had this challenges, is that I want to be impactful and to allow the kids to self-reflect and allow the kids to, on their own, come to an understanding what they did wrong. On the other hand, I have 20 kids in the class that need to be controlled, and I have recess, and I have lunch, and I have an assembly. And if I don't throw that kid out of the assembly, then I lost my entire storyline in discussing the Inyone Pesach. So
Right.
Are we throwing out?
Right. So if I could jump in, I'm sorry. I think that again, high school is very different than elementary school, and I can only answer for that. I think that yes, when we give up some of that, and I love how you say Yiras Aromas, because usually people say Yiras Aromas, but then utilize tools of Yiras Onish. That's interesting. Yiras Aromas, just quick, one quick thought on that. Yiras Aromas in the Bali Musar is this. First, there's Yiras Onish, Yiras Aromas, and Avas Hashem. Yiras Aromas comes after understanding Hashem, and after, like the Rambam says, after you masig, that's where Ava comes, and that's where Yiras Aromas is right there. It comes from respect. An exercise I like to do what does it mean to respect somebody? Respect means to think highly of. They say the Chayyim brings by kibbut aim that the mitzvah of kibbut aim, mitzvah kibbut is to think that even if your fathers is shutim shabam, is to think of them as if kila the chashuvim shabam. Because what it comes from is a focus, is a narrow-minded focus. Like Yisrael says, if you focus on something like a single-minded, like a tunnel focus, you can appreciate it more. You go to a good levai of anybody, you can really be a master of them. So Yiras Aromas comes from a chashivas of a person, to think about them. It comes from thinking highly of. So I think that if we want our kids to have Yiras Aromas of us, I think we should focus less on giving them onish and more on having them actually respect us and being worthy of that respect and being worthy of being thought highly of. So I think that would be a good exercise. But coming back to high school for a second, I think is that with high school, I think that yes, of course we have to have control in the classroom. I think that a few things. First of all, our kids nowadays, I think, are super engaged. I don't know that if you remember when you were kids. I don't know when I was as a kid. I don't remember anyone willingly going to a schmooze, to an inspirational speech on their own time. Nowadays, kids download, intake so many schmooze. They listen to anything. They might even listen to this podcast. Right? They listen to so much. They have so much stuff that they take in. As adults, we complain all the time that, or as rebbeim, as teachers, that the kids' attention spans are so short. We can't get them to listen to us. It's not true. The kids nowadays are thirsting for knowledge. What we have is we need to use kinneso from Tabach Chachma, and we have to see what works. What is it that they're looking for, and to speak their language. Yeah, we can't just sit on a soapbox and say, you're going to listen to me no matter what I say. The onus is on us. They're looking to be engaged. We can engage them.
You
At a high
lose compliance, but you
at a high
lose
school level,
compliance when you do this.
At a high school, right? At a high school level, I think that what works is when you have clear. I'm not going to use the word consequences from Garfield. When you have a clear structure with okay, natural consequences, which are the realities of life.
Natural. Oh, you use the word natural consequence and everyone's fine. It's a natural consequence. Oh, why didn't you say so in the first place?
In other words, what you have to think, what I mean by natural consequences is I could take myself out of it. This has nothing to do with me. I'm here. If you have assignments to do, you have a test to do, you have stuff to learn. I'm not punishing you by not giving you points on your test or not filling out your homework. This is your job. It's my job to then help you and fill that. The more that we could just be simple, create that system, and then be there to help them do something which is in their best interest, and then so then that's to me that's the healthiest way of compliance. And it puts an onus on a teacher. Yeah, you can't get up there and not have an engaging lesson and not have a reason. If a kid could come to your classroom and get 100 and leave your classroom after 5 minutes, you know something? He should leave your classroom. It's Bittel's mind for him to be in your classroom longer. It's on us as an educator. We don't have a right to hold someone hostage. That's an of one of the stars of difference. That's a little signal. You can't kidnap people. You need there needs to be a reason why they're in your classroom, and we need to study. We need to think about it. And you know what? We have, honestly, I think with most of our teachers in the BAM, it's just confidence. They have so much to teach. We just got to believe that we have a lot to teach and a lot to give over.
I want to clarify about
Yeah.
consequences real quick in case I get misquoted, chas v'shalom. I'm not against consequences at all, but I don't put that above a chinuch opportunity. Like in the scenario we were discussing, it was like, do you have to give a consequence? Even though I had a way to effectively be mechanech, then no, I don't feel that the consequence overrides the need to do chinuch. Just want to say that.
I look also at consequences, and really a bigger job of a mechanech is really, and at least at the high school level, where they're starting to be able to be conscious of themselves and be able to be self-aware, and their metacognitive skills are developing. I view our main role is really to help them understand themselves. And so, and as an example, with the realities of consequences, I love that. Actually, I would lean into that in the sense of let's work together. This is your world. This is something you're struggling at. It's between you and you to try to take myself out of it, the teacher out of it. This is you and you. Let's learn about your challenge. Let's learn about that. And your challenge might be that you have to deal with an international teacher, and that's fine. But that's part of life. That's part of you that you have a hard time. So to me, my overall goal, my overarching goal in chinuch is really to be a mirror to the kid, to be as clear as possible who he is, not to pretend and to fake, to be as clear as possible who he is, and yet still, despite that picture, to like him, for him to like, respect, and appreciate himself, and to lean into himself. And that happens from us when we as adults, when we see a clear picture of him and we think highly of him, then we give that over to them.
I'm not so convinced with the premise that it's either or, Rabbi Schonfeld. Meaning the assumption of
Explain.
the question, and it seems like you as well, is that either you lead with an iron fist and you have control, or you lead with compassion and you have chaos or relative chaos. And like I can think of many teachers that I've experienced where they have structure, they have expectations of behavior, but they're wonderfully compassionate people, and you could have both.
Yeah, but you're using the wrong words. These are, and I know I don't know who you're talking about, but there are with the people that you're describing. It's not just they have structure; they're strong, and you don't talk in their class. They're not going to be mevayish you. They're not going to shoot bullets at you. But there are people that maybe have perfected the art of teaching in that their talmidim and their students, the moras, their kids know that they love them. I will share this with you, right? I can almost even say who she is. I'll get in trouble. Too bad. I'm going to say it. Mrs. Manny's is the math teacher in Yeshivish Manhattan. She could listen to this podcast. And I called her into my office last year. And Miss Manny's been teaching for 20 years in our school. From lady. And I said to her, Mrs. Manny's, you have a gift. And I need you to unpack it and teach it to the rest of us in this yeshiva. And she says to me, what? What do you mean? I said, I am petrified of you. And so are all the students. I promise. I said this to her. And I'm a boss, right? I said, I am petrified of you. When you walk into her classroom, the kids don't heap. They don't make a sound. Her classroom manager, there is a yiras, whatever word you want to use, whatever, it's there. But I'm not finished the sentence. She is everyone's favorite person in the building. In the yearbook every year, they dedicate it to her. She is loved. I said, how do you do it? You're so strong, tough on these kids, and their math scores are amazing. What's your gift? How? I said, I'm afraid to walk into your classroom. I'm afraid that I'm going to get in trouble. And yet these kids, they love you. Now she's she's a chabdar.
You think talking
what did she
about
say
the
to me, right?
deceased here? I don't know. I don't know anything about the deceased in the question, But would you say the person in the deceased,
Maybe she was that.
is
Maybe,
that what it sounded like to you? A blessed memory?
I don't know. She's not. By the way, Miss Manny's, her response to me was, "I wish I knew. Since I was 5 years old, I was teaching Menchie's. She grew up in Belgium. She said, I was been teaching since I'm 5 years old." And she said to me a line that like we are all, and we all say blah blah blah. And she says, "I have a purpose to teach. I believe fully in what I'm teaching and who I'm teaching, and the kids know that I love them," which is like so basic. We all say that, but but she has this maybe the perfect combination, and that is her classroom is the best ever. They're always
So Rabbi
learning.
Goldman doesn't have a
Now it's
problem with
math.
her.
Math needs less discussion. It's easier in math, right? It's easier
Right,
in math maybe
Schonfeld,
because less discussion.
we don't have a problem, right? Right. Goldman doesn't have a problem as long as she understands learning disabilities and differentiation and people's
She does
emotional
all of
stuff
that.
and all that stuff, and she's responsive to it. She's not using fear.
She's terrifying.
I wonder how she's.
She's terrifying.
I would
And I don't know if
guess
she can hear this.
it's less that she's terrorizing and more that she's very clear about her
I
expectations.
didn't say terrorizing. I didn't
But
say terrorizing. I said the kids.
terrible.
There is a fear of Miss Manny's. No one will ever miss a homework with Miss Manny's. No one will ever come late to Miss Manny's class. There are kids that will come late to every single class in 8 years in Yeshiva Katana Man, except for
Okay,
math.
so
Because you
Rabbi
don't
Goldman,
come
do
late
you have
to
a
Miss Manny's
problem
class.
with that?
Not at all. And I was actually going to give you
Why
a
not?
slightly
She's
different
using
example.
fear.
Yeah, I'll give a slightly different example of fear. Two kinds of fear. One kind of fear is what we've been talking about. Another kind of fear is when a fear of something which is chashuv. As an example, when someone you have a big game and there's an anxiousness before the big game, you would most of us would never want to give that up. That's awesome. That is a fear of something valuable in my hand and I don't want to drop it. So in Mrs. Manis's class, she's machshav her class. She's machshav what she's doing. It's like there's chashivas going on. I don't want to mess with that. That's what Yuris Aromas is, and that's fine. And people fakert, it's so rich. The air in the room is so rich. I don't want to mess it. It's like walking into Shemona Esrei. I don't want to disturb Shemona Esrei. Not that anyone's going to scream at me. No one knows who I am. Maybe that it could be. But it's also like there's a richness here, and I don't want to drop it. It's like I'm carrying something precious, and I don't want to drop it. So, yeah, I am a little
Are we
nervous.
missing that? But so are we missing that today? Most of our classes don't have that, and they don't have it almost on purpose.
I'm not going to judge that. I do think in a lot of classes we do have that. And I think a teacher who's on fire and does care about that a lot does have that. You're right. I think sometimes people are scared. I also think that sometimes, even in that environment, there aren't downsides of that. Because, yeah, even when you have something so chashuv, there's a lot of people who don't play up to that. There's a lot of the stats in the big game sometimes go down. And some people do get scared to shoot. And they play a little hot potato with the ball. Because even though they love it and they thrive off
That's
that.
beauty. Again, I don't want to. This is not the Miss Manny's podcast, but our math scores in our school are like the highest of any subject.
Are there
just
any
through the roof,
kids
and the
who
kids are
don't
taking-
do well with
But
them?
that doesn't mean, again, math is a little different. That doesn't mean.
No. Are there any kids that don't do well with her? No. She's like the Mount Rushmore. She's the most.
It could be. That's a great point. But I also think that math is, again, different. Math is a black and white subject. It doesn't mean
Correct.
It doesn't mean
100%.
it's setting me into their emotional state of being and that there's. It could be.
100%.
I think also going back to engagement, I think one thing that we need to focus on is a focus on engaging the kids. And yeah, first, I agree, not every environment are you ready to have a 300 kid assembly. And sometimes Taka, because of this issue that you don't have fear.
You run it. I know Heichal is a very large school. There's 300 kids in this school, basically, right? Do you
Yeah.
run 300 kid assemblies
220,
yourself?
220. Yeah, yes and no. When it is, it's only when it's a kind of thing which naturally has that aura to it. First of all, I'm very careful to think, and not just for myself, to all of us, any programming we're doing, how long can it be? When can it be? And I'm not thinking for myself that the pashtus is that they're going to be super engaged. I have to think very
Well, when
carefully.
you run an assembly for 220 kids,
I'm thinking
you
how
are-
certain
you
that's
are-
going to be.
you're thinking
I'm
how
thinking
short
how-
it's going to be, but you're walking in with a whole, what I call the game face, the
Yes,
Menahos face.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
very different face than when you're subbing for the Bekias Rebbe, right,
Sure,
on a
sure.
Thursday. Very
Sure.
different face,
Sure.
right?
And you know what? You have to think. You have to be realistic about what the crowd is, what the crowd's ready for, how long. The same thing is true. You have this really long davening, and after a long davening, every second that the long davening is longer, you have to think about that kid and how he's thinking there. And you know what? It might not be the time to give that speech right then. You have to that has to be all dasa for us. And yeah, we could put fear into them, have them sit for the next 4 hours. Yeah, but that's not healthy. They're not going to learn like that. So we add that kind of thinking. What's the healthy environment? I think also, again, engaging, thinking about how they need to be engaged and reaching them there. And sometimes reaching them, it doesn't mean less. I think one thing we sometimes slip into that this is for the lesser student or this is for the kid who can't concentrate. No, this could be true even in a super bright kid and a super. I think that if I had to guess, all three of us in this room, at times there were environments where we were like super power and uber focused and super into it. And it wasn't necessarily from someone else giving us a speech for 4 hours. It was when we were able to learn in the style that we were able to. When someone thought, when it was we were engaged in the style we were engaged in, when we were able to use our brain and let that horse run. Like you got to, so you have to know you have to think about that, how to create that. A classroom environment, like I think that I myself, as an example, is Chataya and Yimaz Garayom, when I give shir, this is the first time I'm not giving shir in the past 16 years. When I give shir, I often, I had Rabbi Shlomo Harris, who's going and teaching skills in Gemara. The way I taught shir was almost mamish the opposite of him. Is that if I would teach shir like him, so I would be teaching skills incredibly, but like the kids, I might be wrong, but my perception is the kids would be bored stiff. And so like to me, shir is, I gotta grab them, and the kids are flying. It's my matter sitting there mamish. They're loving it. But yeah, and then I got to fold the skills in and think about how I'm getting those skills in there. So like, I think that we have to think how to reach these kids and how to engage the kids, and without using that external fear factor.
Is there any place where you feel we've gone too far? Where, like, not obviously in your yeshiva and the Heilige Heichal, but when you look at the landscape of chinuch and the way psychologists are always involved, and do you ever feel is there an area where you feel we're maybe getting close to being too soft or too easy?
I think that it's a great question. I think that we need to believing in the power of Torah and the power of, as we talked before, power of us being a model. If a Rebbe ever loses that, meaning if a kid looks at his Rebbe as that Dimyon of Hashem, so then the Rebbe has this amazing opportunity to teach the kid about Hashem and to teach the kid about the beauty of Torah, but what it means to embody Torah, and then also to teach the kid what Hashem thinks about him. The moment that it slips into that the kid thinks of his Rebbe no longer as that model of Hashem, that it slips into he's my friend and I don't have that value of him, I don't have that chashivas, then we've gone too far. So I wouldn't say systematically we have that, but I would say in circumstances we can have that. In terms of understanding people's needs, I think, and
Do you text your Talmidim?
the honest truth is that in Heicha I text much less than I've texted in the past. Now part of it could be because I'm not teaching them, I'm not a Rebbe. So that,
But in the
that could
past,
be-
you
But
would.
it's not. It sounds
Yeah.
like it's not a shita.
But it's
Yeah.
not a fair dimion because it depends where. Different environments, things mean different things. So to compare from one environment to another is not fair. Like as an example,
One of my administrators recently got an email from a student, a younger student in the school. I had an idea for school. And I said to that administrator, please don't respond to that email. There's a kid emailing
It's
an
a hell-
administrator
listen,
in an
every
elementary school.
environment
high
is
school is a
different.
little
Whoa.
different.
Yeah, but there are
I know
problems.
every environment is different. I know this, but that's always the straddling that you have to do is if I text, do I play ball with Talmidim? Do I text? That's where, and then of course, every yeshiva is different, every sift is different. You have to maintain that surah of a Rebbe versus a friend can always be challenging.
Exactly. I think also in terms of when we look at psychology, and I think one of the hills that we still have to climb as a community is that even those who are into psychology, or even those who are into psychology, is people look at it as goyish, but even those who are into feelings, into emotions, into to midos development, we usually look at that as for the soft kid. I think it was the second that you start talking about your yeshiva or a Rebbe who's into that stuff, people all of a sudden equate you. You must be some kind of B-level yeshiva, or you're for like the B'diavad kids. As Ki'ilu, like the lechatchila is just to have a head and no neshama. And that's something which us as a community, we really need to
I'm going to share an amazing story with you. I said the story a bunch of podcasts ago, so it bears repeating. And that is, I know someone, a chashav yeshiva that opened in Lakewood, Talmud of Rabbi Eli Ber. And he came to Rabbi Eli Ber with the following suffix dilemma. He says, I have a half hour to spend at night with my Talmidim. I could either spend it on the 10% that struggle with mental health, and that's what he said to him. This is a Beis Medrash Rebbe, and discuss, in the mental health, or I could sit to the 90% that are Baruch Hashem Mitzuyanim, and I could talk about Rashbas and Rebbe Chanan's and Rebbe Chaim's. What should I spend my time on? And Rabbi Eli Ber told him, a Rebbe who's not known to be such a progressive, right? The kasha is a toes. The 90% also need mental health. Mamish, right? This, right? So you're mechavan to Yeshiva of South Fallsburg.
Very good. Yeah, I think, and to me, what I have in Heichal is I have a wide range. There's 4 levels of shurim, and they're vastly different. And this particular prat, it's in a certain sense in Heichal to many, it's like it's much harder for someone who's really steiging and doing and learning hours outside of yeshiva and steiging away and has never made a mistake and never hit a wall in his life. It's much harder for him to find his feelings and to be vulnerable and to open up.
He's never
And
had
that's
to. He's never
Yeah.
had to.
Yeah. So I think that what I like to do is to find is first of all, when you talk about things in just the overall, create a certain atmosphere and environment to become safe, and then everyone is able to feel it. The way you act and deal with some in one environment, then others see it and they learn from that. And I too am a human and I can do that too. And then also to capitalize on the mini car crashes, and like when a kid does encounter trouble, which we will, is to grab those and to really to help him engage himself and to learn about himself.
Wonderful.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you, Goldman. This is really great. We did cover a lot, and it's nice to meet you. We've interacted along the years, but it's nice to spend some good time with you, and I think we could have fun. We could continue this, Mirza Shem, you know?
It's a shame. You guys you're doing great things and you're having a great time.
That's for sure.
Baruch Hashem.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, David.
All right, wow, that was wonderful, and it's great. It's great to go back to old camp rivalries. I enjoyed that aspect of it.
It was not a camp rival.
What do you mean?
We were not
A
camp
hockey
rivals.
stick to the head does a rivalry make?
Yeah, he was a much better athlete than me in hockey. I think he's a year older than me, definitely a grade older than me. He skipped a lot of grades, as you can hear from his very bright
Yes.
and thoughtful person, but an exceptional mechanech. And Baruch Hashem, we got a window into that
Yeah.
and covered a lot of big topics
Yes.
and big conversations. That's what we're here for,
All
to
right.
talk about big things.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us on the learning curve. I'd like to share the feedback information because we do love that. You could call 443-686-9339. That's 443-686-9339. Or you can always send an email to thelearningcurve@mishpacha.com. That's thelearningcurve@mishpacha.com. Thank you, everybody. It's always so much fun to hear from our listeners, so keep the feedback coming.